After months of planning a long cross-country trip, I finally pulled my RV back into my driveway, excited to be home. The journey had been incredible, filled with mountain passes, desert roads, and family campfires. But nothing felt as good as rolling back into my own neighborhood. My home sat inside a quiet suburban community, governed by an HOA, and though I knew they had rules, I never imagined my RV would cause such a storm. The moment I parked, I noticed curtains twitching. Neighbors peeked out with curiosity. But one in particular, Karen, the self-appointed watchdog of the HOA, was glaring at me like I had just pulled in with a wrecking ball. Karen was infamous in our neighborhood. She was the type to measure lawns with a ruler, to call the city if a trash can lingered at the curb for an extra hour. I unhooked the trailer, secured it neatly, and made sure it wasn't blocking anyone's property. I had read the HOA bylaws before, and while they didn't allow permanent RV storage, nothing prohibited short-term parking for unloading or cleaning. I figured a couple of days wouldn't hurt, but Karen had other plans. That evening, as I was inside unloading groceries, I heard a knock, more like a police bang, on my door. There she stood with a clipboard in one hand and her phone in the other. "You can't park that thing here," she snapped. "HOA rules. I've already called a tow truck." I calmly explained that the rules allowed temporary parking and that I'd move it soon. But Karen wasn't having it. "Rules are rules," she said smugly. "The tow truck is coming in the morning." I shook my head, frustrated but not panicked. Something told me Karen was overstepping her authority. Still, I decided to document everything. Photos, HOA guidelines, even a video recording of my interaction. I had a feeling I'd need it. That night, as I sat on the porch sipping coffee, I watched Karen pacing near my driveway, phone glued to her ear, whispering into the receiver like she was plotting a major bust. I knew then this wasn't about rules. This was about control, and I wasn't going to let her win. The next morning, I woke to the unmistakable sound of a diesel engine outside. Pulling back the blinds, I saw it. An enormous tow truck idling in front of my driveway. Karen stood nearby, arms crossed, looking smug. She had actually gone through with it. I rushed outside, paperwork in hand. "Excuse me," I called to the driver. "You can't tow this RV. It's on my private property." The driver looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am here," he gestured toward Karen, "said this vehicle violates HOA rules." "She's the board president?" "She's not," I corrected firmly. "She's just a resident. And this RV is legally parked. Here's a copy of the HOA guidelines." I handed him the printed page highlighting the section about temporary parking. Karen's face turned red. "Don't listen to him, tow it. He's breaking the rules and the HOA has authorized this." The driver scratched his head. "Ma'am, unless you're the legal property owner or law enforcement, I can't tow this without consent. That's trespassing." I could see Karen boiling. She pulled out her phone and dialed rapidly. "Fine, I'll get the sheriff here." "Then you'll see," she barked, glaring at me like she had already won. I shrugged. "Good idea. Let's get the sheriff involved." For a split second, Karen looked stunned. Maybe she thought the threat would scare me into moving the RV, but instead, I welcomed the call. The tow truck driver leaned against his rig, clearly not eager to get caught in a neighborhood feud. Neighbors started to gather, some shaking their heads, others whispering. The tension was thick, like the calm before a storm. Karen strutted around, loudly announcing, "This community won't tolerate rule breakers. We all pay dues for a reason." I ignored her rant and calmly filmed the scene on my phone. I knew the sheriff's arrival would settle things once and for all. It didn't take long. Within 15 minutes, a county sheriff's SUV pulled up. Out stepped a tall officer with mirrored sunglasses and a no-nonsense expression. The crowd of neighbors hushed instantly. Karen marched straight up to him. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man is violating HOA rules. Tow his RV immediately." The sheriff glanced at me, then at the RV, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, slow down. First, whose property is this parked on?" "His," Karen admitted, pointing at me. "But HOA rules don't allow RVs." The sheriff turned to me. "Sir, do you have documentation?" I nodded, handing over my printed bylaws and my phone showing the highlighted section. "Sheriff, as you can see, I'm within the rules for temporary parking. I've only been here one night." The sheriff studied the paper, then looked at Karen. "Ma'am, these rules clearly allow temporary parking for up to 72 hours. This man is not in violation. Karen's mouth dropped. That can't be right. I know the rules. The sheriff's voice grew firm. Ma'am, you cannot authorize a tow from private property. That would be illegal. If this tow truck had attempted to remove the vehicle, both you and the driver could face charges. The tow truck driver quickly raised his hands. Hey, I'm not touching it. I was just responding to a call. The neighbors chuckled softly. Karen's face turned crimson as the sheriff continued. Ma'am, you are not the HOA board nor law enforcement. If you keep harassing your neighbors or making false reports, you could face consequences. Karen sputtered. But, the sheriff cut her off. Enough, go home. The crowd was buzzing now, whispers turning into laughter. The neighborhood queen bee had just been swatted down. I couldn't help but smile. After the sheriff left, Karen tried to scurry back to her house, but the damage was done. Neighbors were shaking their heads, some even laughing openly at her humiliation. For years she had bullied others with her misinterpretations of the rules, but this time she had crossed a line too publicly. I walked back toward my RV, the tow truck driver giving me a friendly nod. Sorry about the trouble, he said. Some people just like to stir things up. No worries, I replied. Thanks for not overstepping. Word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. By evening, I had received texts from several neighbors thanking me for standing my ground. Some even admitted they had been victims of Karen's overreach before. Letters about garden decorations, threats about lawn heights, even complaints about kids playing too loudly. The HOA board itself held a quick emergency meeting after hearing about the incident. They issued a neighborhood notice clarifying that only the board had authority to enforce rules and that private residents could not call in outside contractors like tow companies without official approval. Though they didn't name Karen directly, everyone knew who it was about. As for Karen, she kept a much lower profile after that. No more pacing around with clipboards. No more shouting about rules at the top of her lungs. She still scowled when she saw me, but the power she once wielded over the neighborhood had been shattered. For me, the RV trip had ended with an unexpected twist, but also a victory. Not just for myself, but for every neighbor who had been tired of living under Karen's thumb. The sheriff's words still echoed in my mind. You cannot authorize a tow from private property. That single sentence had exposed Karen's entire act of false authority. And as I stood there watching the sunset reflect off the polished side of my RV, I couldn't help but grin. Karen had tried to tow my RV, but in the end, she had only towed away her own reputation.